A billionaire named Jack was driving home one freezing night when he saw a young girl sitting alone on a bench, shivering, scared, and holding two crying babies in her arms. Something told him to stop. He took them to his mansion, gave them food, warmth, and safety. Her name was Emily. She had lost everything, but never gave up on her children. As days passed, Jack saw something in her he hadn't seen in years: hope, strength, and the power of a mother's love. He gave her more than shelter. He gave her a second chance. And in return, she gave him something money couldn't buy: family. Their story went on to inspire an entire community, and it all began with one simple act of kindness on a cold winter night. If you love these types of stories, then don't forget to comment down below from where you are watching. You can support us by liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel. It was late December in a small Ohio town. The streets were quiet. The only sound was the wind blowing through the bare trees. Snow had started to fall again, covering the sidewalks in a soft white layer. Most people were home, curled up by the fire, warm and safe. But one man wasn't. Jack Carter, a 60-year-old billionaire, sat in the back of his black town car. He had just left a holiday fundraiser. It was held at a grand hotel downtown. There were speeches, handshakes, fancy meals. Jack gave a large check, smiled for the cameras, and did what was expected. But his heart wasn't in it. Even though Jack had money, homes, and power, he often felt empty. Especially during the holidays. His wife had passed away 5 years ago. His only son, David, lived across the country and rarely called. Jack had built an empire. But the bigger it got, the lonelier he became. The car rolled through the quiet streets, past small shops with closed signs and twinkling lights in the windows. Jack looked out at the falling snow, lost in thought. Then something caught his eye. "Wait," he said suddenly. "Stop the car." His driver hit the brakes and pulled over near a small city park. Jack leaned forward and squinted through the frosty window. There, on a worn wooden bench, sat a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 22 or 23. Her arms were wrapped around two tiny figures. Babies. Maybe 1 year old. Maybe younger. She sat still, not moving. Her coat was far too thin for the cold. The babies were bundled in small, worn blankets, but it wasn't enough. Jack's heart dropped. "Pop the trunk," he said to the driver as he opened his door. The cold hit him like a slap. The wind was sharp. His breath came out in clouds. But he moved quickly toward the bench. As he got closer, he saw the woman's face. Her cheeks were red and raw. Her lips were turning blue. The babies weren't crying. They were too cold to even make a sound. Jack knelt beside her. "Miss," he said gently, "are you all right?" The woman opened her eyes slowly. She looked dazed, barely awake. Her arms tightened around the babies as she pulled back. "Please, don't take them," she whispered, voice trembling. Jack held up his hands. "No, no. I'm not here to hurt you. I want to help." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked exhausted, afraid, and frozen to the bone. I don't have anywhere to go," she said softly. Jack reached out and touched the edge of one baby's blanket. The little girl inside looked pale and weak. Jack's heart clenched. This wasn't right. Not in this country. Not in this town. Not on his watch. He took off his heavy wool coat and wrapped it around the young woman and her children. Then he turned back to the car and waved his driver over. "Help me get them in the car," Jack said. "Turn the heat all the way up." The driver hesitated for just a moment, then nodded and rushed to help. The woman swayed as she stood. Jack gently took one baby in his arms. The child was so light, so still, it frightened him. The woman followed, clutching the other twin close to her chest. As they stepped into the warmth of the car, Jack looked at her again. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Emily," she said, barely above a whisper. Jack gave her a nod. "Well, Emily, you're coming home with me." She looked at him, confused, unsure. But in that moment, something changed. And none of their lives would ever be the same again. The inside of the car felt like summer compared to the bitter wind outside. The heater hummed as the windows slowly defrosted. Jack sat beside the young mother, his coat still wrapped tightly around her. One baby rested in her lap. The other, in Jack's arms, was finally starting to move a little. The girl looked down, rocking gently. Her lips still trembled from the cold. Jack studied her face. Pale, tired, too young to look so worn. But her eyes, those were eyes that had seen too much pain too soon. He spoke gently. "Emily, do you have anyone to call? Any family at all?" She shook her head slowly. "No one left. My parents died when I was 16. I married young, and he—" Her voice cracked. She wiped her eyes. "He died in a car accident 3 months ago. Drunk driver. It was sudden. One second he was calling me to say he was coming home, and the next he was gone." Jack nodded quietly. He didn't interrupt. He knew grief like that. He had felt it too. Emily continued. "We didn't have savings. I couldn't pay rent. The landlord kicked us out 2 weeks later. I tried shelters, but they were full. People see a young mom with babies and just walk faster." Her hands tightened around her child. "I've been sleeping in parks, wrapping them up the best I can. I beg outside diners. Sometimes someone gives me a sandwich. Most don't even look at me." Jack's jaw tightened. He looked down at the baby in his arms. Tiny, precious, helpless. They didn't deserve this. None of them did. He turned to his driver. "Take us straight home. And call Maria. Tell her to prep the guest wing. Cribs, warm bottles, everything." The driver gave a nod in the rearview mirror and made the call. Emily looked at Jack, confused. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Jack gave her a small smile. "When I was a boy, I watched my mother sleep on a bus stop bench in winter. I remember what that felt like." His voice softened. "And I promised myself, if I ever made it, no mother would suffer like that on my watch." Emily's lips trembled again. But this time, it wasn't from the cold. It was the shock of being seen. Of being treated like a person again. She lowered her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jack reached into his jacket and handed her a handkerchief. It was soft, clean, neatly folded. The kind of thing most folks don't carry anymore. But Jack still did. The babies started to stir. One let out a tiny cry. It was the first sound Jack had heard from either of them. Emily panicked for a moment, trying to comfort both at once. Jack smiled and gently handed her the second child. "You're not alone anymore," he said quietly. She held both children in her lap, wrapped in Jack's coat, close to her heart. Their little heads rested on her shoulders. And slowly, for the first time in days, maybe weeks, she began to relax. Outside, the city lights passed by. Christmas decorations sparkled in windows. Wreaths hung on doors. People were tucked inside with their families. Warm, safe, fed. Emily hadn't expected to survive this night. But now she was headed to a mansion, with heat, food, and a man who didn't see her as a burden, but as someone worth saving. She looked at Jack once more. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack gave a gentle nod. He didn't say it, but he felt something shift deep in his chest. A space that had been cold for a long time was slowly starting to warm again. And as the car turned into the long drive leading to his home, Jack Carter knew. This wasn't charity. This was purpose. The car rolled through the black iron gates of Jack Carter's estate. Snow had blanketed the long driveway, but the warmth of soft glowing lights led the way. At the top of the hill stood Jack's mansion, grand, timeless, and quiet. It was the kind of house people slowed down to stare at. Yet for years, it had felt more like a museum than a home. Emily sat quietly, still holding both of her babies close. Her eyes were wide as she stared out the window. The house was bigger than any place she had ever stepped inside. A winding path lined with trimmed hedges and Christmas lights sparkled beneath the fresh snow. Jack looked over and saw her nerves tightening again. "I know it looks like a castle," he said with a small smile, "but inside, it's just a house. And tonight, it's your house too." Emily didn't speak. She was still trying to understand if this was real or some strange, kind dream. Jack's driver pulled the car up to the front steps. As the vehicle stopped, the front door opened. A woman in her early 60s hurried out. Her silver hair was pulled into a bun, and she wore a warm cardigan over her apron. Maria. She had worked for Jack for over 20 years. Cook, housekeeper, and truthfully, his only real friend in the house. The moment Maria saw the babies, her face changed. She rushed forward, gently opening the car door and helping Emily out. "Oh honey," she said softly, "let's get you and those angels out of the cold." Jack helped carry one of the twins. Maria took the other, carefully supporting the baby's head with practiced hands. Emily walked between them, overwhelmed and silent. Inside, the house was warm, almost too warm. The entry hall was glowing with golden lights, and a fire burned in the hearth. Emily's eyes darted around. Polished floors, high ceilings, art on the walls. She had never been in a place so beautiful, yet she felt like a ghost drifting through it. A girl from the street, now standing inside a mansion. Maria turned to her with a mother's gentleness. "We've got the guest wing ready. There's a nursery next door, full of toys no one's ever used. Come, sweetheart. Let's settle you in." Jack stayed back, watching as Maria led Emily upstairs. She didn't ask questions, didn't press. She just did what was needed: warm milk, soft blankets, gentle care. That was Maria's way. Jack trusted her with everything, and tonight, more than ever, he was grateful for her heart. An hour passed. The babies were fed and bathed. Emily had taken a shower, her first in weeks. She changed into fresh clothes Maria had pulled from storage, simple but clean. When she came back down, Jack was sitting at the long kitchen table, sipping tea. He looked up and gave a soft smile. "There you are," he said. Emily walked in slowly, unsure of what to say. "I don't know how to thank you," she finally whispered. Jack shook his head. "You don't have to. Just take care of those kids. That's thanks enough." She sat down across from him. For a few seconds, they sat in silence. Not awkward, just quiet. Warm. Still. "Most people wouldn't have stopped," she said, barely looking up. Jack nodded slowly. "Most people are afraid of what they don't understand. But I saw you. I saw a mother doing everything she could to protect her babies." Emily's voice cracked. "I thought I was going to lose them." Jack leaned forward and placed a hand over hers. "You didn't. Not on my watch." And for the first time in a long, long while, Emily let herself believe it. She was safe. They all were. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting a golden glow across the room. It was peaceful, quiet in a way Emily hadn't felt in months. No cold wind on her face. No sirens in the distance. Just warmth. Soft sheets. And the sound of her babies breathing beside her. She opened her eyes slowly, not sure if she had dreamed everything that happened the night before. But then she saw the crib in the corner. The clean clothes folded neatly on a chair. The warm baby bottles on a side table. It was real. Tears filled her eyes again. But this time, they weren't from fear or sadness. They were from something she hadn't felt in a long, long time: relief. Downstairs, Jack sat at the kitchen island with Maria. He sipped his coffee quietly, staring out the window at the snow-covered trees in the backyard. "She's awake," Maria said softly, glancing up the stairs. Jack nodded. "Let her take her time." Maria sat across from him, folding a towel in her lap. "You did a good thing, Jack." He looked at her, eyes a little tired. "I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," Maria said, smiling gently. "You gave someone hope. Most people walk past pain. You walked into it." Jack didn't answer. But he felt something shift in his chest again. That hollow space was filling. A few minutes later, Emily stepped into the kitchen. She was holding one baby, and the other toddled beside her, gripping her hand. The babies were smiling. Clean, fed, and warm. Their eyes sparkled like the winter sun. Jack stood and pulled out a chair. "Morning." Emily smiled shyly. "Morning." Maria rushed over and helped the babies into high chairs she'd cleaned from the attic. Then she set a plate of pancakes and scrambled eggs in front of Emily. I can't accept all this," Emily said, hesitating. Jack looked her straight in the eyes. "You already have. And I won't let you feel ashamed for surviving." Emily sat quietly for a moment, then picked up a fork. The smell of the warm food made her stomach growl. She hadn't had a real meal in days. She took a bite, soft, buttery, perfect. Maria's cooking was more than food. It was comfort. Home. As the babies giggled over little bites of pancake, Jack leaned forward. "I have a guest house out back," he said. "It's small, but it's private. Fully furnished. You and the twins can stay there as long as you need. No pressure. No rent. Just safety." Emily looked at him, stunned. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Jack took a breath. "I lost my wife to cancer. 5 years ago. I watched her suffer, and I couldn't do anything. Then I lost my son's love because I buried myself in work. I thought success would fill the cracks. But it didn't." He paused. "Last night, I saw a young mother doing everything to protect her babies. And I thought, maybe this is what I've been missing. Maybe helping someone else find their way is how I find mine." Emily's hands trembled slightly on her coffee mug. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Jack gave her a kind smile. "Then don't say anything yet. Just breathe. Eat. Let your babies laugh. That's all I ask." And in that moment, it didn't matter how much money Jack had. What mattered was what he was giving. Dignity. Safety. A chance. And what Emily was beginning to feel, for the first time in forever, was something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The days that followed moved slowly, like the quiet snowfall outside Jack Carter's estate. Emily settled into the guest house behind the mansion, a cozy 2-bedroom cottage with warm lighting, soft rugs, and walls painted in calming cream. She had never lived in a place so quiet. No sirens, no shouting, no cold wind rattling windows. Just peace. Jack visited every morning, bringing groceries, diapers, and warm drinks in his hands. He didn't hover or make her feel watched. He simply showed up, kind and consistent, and asked how the babies were doing. Their names were Liam and Lily, twins but already with different personalities. Liam was calm, observant, and quiet. Lily was the louder one, always reaching for things, grabbing her brother's pacifier with a proud grin. Maria stopped by each evening with home-cooked meals, chicken pot pie, creamy tomato soup, cornbread, mashed potatoes, and enough leftovers to last the next day. Emily, for the first time in her young life, started gaining weight again. Her cheeks regained color, and her shoulders relaxed a little more with each passing day. One snowy afternoon, while the twins napped peacefully, Emily sat by the fireplace in the guest house, staring into the flames. Jack knocked gently and stepped inside, carrying a box. Thought I'd drop this off, he said, setting it down. Emily opened it slowly. Inside were photo albums, baby clothes, a hand-knit blanket, and a small snow globe. She picked it up and turned it over, watching the glitter fall. These were my wife's, Jack said softly. She always hoped we'd have a grandchild one day. We never did. But maybe it's time they were used. Emily's hands shook as she placed the snow globe on the mantel. She didn't know what to say. No one had ever made her feel like she mattered this much. Jack sat across from her and looked at the fire. You know, he said slowly, I used to think money fixed everything. I worked day and night to build an empire. But when I came home to silence, I realized success doesn't feel like much when there's no one to share it with. Emily nodded quietly, her eyes beginning to shine. I never had much, she said, but I always thought if I loved hard enough, it would be enough. Then, life happened. Jack looked at her gently. You loved those kids enough to freeze for them. That's not failure. That's strength. She smiled, tears slipping down her cheek. I never expected anyone to care. Jack leaned forward. Well, I do. And I'm not going anywhere. That night, after Jack left, Emily tucked Liam and Lily into bed and stood by the window, watching the snow fall outside. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. She didn't feel invisible. She felt human again. She placed a hand on her heart, whispering a silent thank you to the stars, to God, to whatever power had led her to that park bench on the very night Jack Carter happened to pass by. Somewhere between brokenness and kindness, between pain and warmth, she had found something no shelter, no handout, and no stranger had ever given her, a real second chance. And that chance, born from one man's quiet compassion, was now beginning to bloom. Jasmine Carter, a successful black CEO, walks into her own luxury hotel, only to be denied a room by the receptionist. Moments later, she watches as a white couple is offered a suite. When she reveals her identity as the owner, the entire lobby falls silent. The manager stammers, offering excuses, but Jasmine isn't here for apologies, she's here for accountability. With one powerful decision, she ensures respect is no longer optional in her company. If you love these types of stories, don't forget to comment down below where you're watching from. You can support us by liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Jasmine Carter had spent the last decade building her hotel empire from the ground up. A child of humble beginnings, she was raised by hard-working parents in Atlanta, who instilled in her the values of perseverance, kindness, and never letting anyone define her worth. From the time she was a little girl, she had dreamed of owning a chain of luxury hotels, a dream that had driven her to work tirelessly. And now, at the age of 42, she was the CEO of Carter Luxury Hotels, a thriving business with locations in some of the most prestigious cities across the country. One crisp autumn evening, Jasmine decided to visit one of her newest properties, the Carter Grand in Chicago. It was an unannounced visit. She often liked to see how her employees performed when they weren't expecting an inspection. Dressed in a tailored navy blue business suit, she stepped into the grand lobby with her rolling suitcase in hand. The lobby was buzzing with guests, the marble floors gleamed under the soft golden lights, and a soothing melody played from the speakers. Jasmine took a deep breath, proud of what she had built. She walked up to the front desk where a young white receptionist, Hannah, stood behind the counter. Hannah barely glanced at Jasmine before forcing a polite, tight-lipped smile. Good evening, welcome to Carter Grand. How can I help you? She asked. Jasmine smiled warmly. Good evening. I'd like to check in. I have a reservation under Jasmine Carter. Hannah's smile faltered as she looked at the computer screen. She typed the name in and frowned slightly. Jasmine could see the confusion on her face as she glanced back up. I'm sorry, but I don't see a reservation under that name, she said. Jasmine nodded. That's okay, I'll book a room now. Hannah hesitated, then said, Actually, I'm afraid we're fully booked. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. She knew for a fact that wasn't true. She had checked the availability before she arrived. Are you sure about that? She asked calmly. Yes, ma'am, Hannah said, avoiding eye contact. Just then, a white couple stepped up beside Jasmine. The man, wearing a sharp gray suit, smiled at Hannah. We need a room for the night. Any availability? He asked smoothly. Hannah's face lit up. Of course, Mr. Peterson. We have several deluxe suites available. Jasmine folded her arms across her chest. That's interesting, she said, her voice even but firm. Because just now, you told me there were no rooms available. Hannah's face turned red. Oh, Before she could say anything, the hotel manager, Brian, stepped out from the office. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair, wearing an expensive suit. His eyes landed on Jasmine, and he immediately frowned. Is there a problem here? He asked, his tone impatient. Yes, Jasmine said, standing her ground. I was just informed that there are no rooms available. But then I watched as this gentleman was offered multiple options. Brian looked Jasmine up and down, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Hannah. Is there a reservation under this woman's name? No, sir, Hannah said quickly. Brian turned back to Jasmine with a smug smile. I'm afraid we can't accommodate walk-ins at this time. Jasmine exhaled slowly. She had encountered discrimination before, but it never ceased to sting. Still, she wasn't about to let this slide. Reaching into her purse, she pulled out her phone and scrolled to an email. Since you don't recognize me, she said, her voice calm but commanding, perhaps this will refresh your memory. She held up her phone, displaying an email from corporate headquarters, an email with her signature as CEO. Brian's face drained of color as he read the screen. Hannah's eyes widened in horror. The realization dawned on them like a slap to the face. Why Hannah stammered. Yes, Jasmine said firmly. I'm Jasmine Carter, the owner of this hotel. And you both just refused me service in my own establishment. The lobby fell silent. Guests nearby paused their conversations, watching the unfolding scene with curiosity. Brian's confidence evaporated instantly, and he began stammering excuses. Miss Carter, I had no idea. That's the problem, Jasmine interrupted. You didn't even bother to check. You took one look at me and assumed I didn't belong here. Brian gulped. It was a mistake, truly. Please, let me offer you the best suite in the hotel. On the house. Jasmine shook her head. I don't want a free room. What I want is accountability. She turned to Hannah. And you, why did you lie? Hannah looked down, ashamed. I don't know. I just assumed. You assumed I didn't belong, Jasmine finished. This is exactly why I work so hard, to make sure people who look like me don't have to keep proving themselves in spaces they already earned. By now, the entire lobby was watching. Some guests nodded in agreement, others murmured to each other in shock. Jasmine turned back to Brian. You and Hannah can clear out your desks. First thing tomorrow morning, I want your resignations on my desk. Brian's mouth fell open. Miss Carter, please. This isn't up for debate, she said. I will not allow this kind of treatment in my company. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Brian and Hannah frozen in place, their faces pale with regret. As she rode the elevator up to her penthouse suite, Jasmine felt a mix of emotions, anger, disappointment, but also pride. She had built something incredible, and she wouldn't let anyone tarnish it. And most importantly, she had just reminded everyone in that lobby that dignity and respect weren't optional, they were expected. And that was a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon.